Hello, and welcome to Fear Noir. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that gently draw you deeper into the darkness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable. Let your body become completely still and allow the noise of the outside world to quietly fade into silence. Tonight, a story waits for you in the dark. So, close your eyes, listen closely, and let yourself drift into Fear Noir. Story 1. We all know poachers as the kind of ruthless hunters who slaughter endangered animals for tusks, pelts, horns, and organs. Cruel, yes, but at least they only target wildlife. Or, that's what I used to believe. From the moment I saw my first tattoo as a kid, I knew I would never stop at one. I remember staring at a man in line at a grocery store, his forearm covered in black ink, and thinking it was the coolest thing I had ever seen. I wanted that. I wanted art that stayed with me, and as soon as I was old enough, I started collecting it. Over the years, I'd built a gallery across my body, black and gray skulls, bright roses, portraits, lyrics from songs that saved me during rough years, ink across my biceps, forearms, thighs, shins, hands, feet, chest, torso, neck, pretty much everywhere except my face, and that was only because my corporate job would never tolerate it. My parents weren't thrilled, but they accepted it. They warned me that heavily tattooed people sometimes attract the wrong kind of attention, gang assumptions, suspicious cops, dangerous crowds. I'd laugh it off and tell them I wasn't reckless. I just liked art. I never imagined my tattoos would attract the kind of danger they did. My favorite piece was the lion across my chest. It stretched from shoulder to shoulder, mane flaring outward in intricate detail. Lions had always meant something to me. Strength, survival, fearlessness. I kept that one closest to my heart. My girlfriend, Dove, loved my tattoos. It was the first thing she complimented about me. She had some of her own, minimalist designs along her arms and collarbone, and she always talked about getting more. We bonded over that shared hunger for something wild in our otherwise painfully ordinary lives. Then one day she surprised me. She handed me tickets for an African safari. I'd always dreamed of seeing a lion in the wild. She knew that. I was overwhelmed. It felt thoughtful, romantic, perfect. So we flew to Tanzania, 2 long flights, and then a ride in a safari buggy to a refined lodge in the middle of the Serengeti. Endless golden grasslands. Baobab trees silhouetted against blazing sunsets. The landscape felt bigger than anything I'd ever seen. For the first time, I felt slightly self-conscious about my tattoos. I didn't know how they'd be perceived here. Dove reassured me, told me to own who I was. And the first night, everyone was friendly. Nothing but smiles. On our first safari drive, we met another couple, Cliff and Krista. They were travelers like us, covered in tattoos. They told us they collected ink from every country they visited. I relaxed. Being a tattooed tourist wasn't strange here. The safari itself was incredible. Giraffes moved like drifting sculptures. Zebras dotted the horizon. Hippos lounged in muddy pools. But there were no lions. Instead, I noticed a group of Western-looking men in hunting gear. standing off in the distance, watching. Our guide stiffened when I asked about them. International poachers, he said quietly, but not ordinary ones. They hadn't been caught hunting animals in years, yet they remained on the reserve. The guide didn't elaborate. One of them had binoculars, and one of them was looking directly at me. That night at dinner, they approached our table. The leader introduced himself as Hayes, polished British accent, confident smile, the kind of man who seemed comfortable anywhere. He complimented our tattoos, especially mine. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. Dove didn't hold back. She insulted poachers openly, her voice sharp with contempt. Hayes only smiled. Later, as they returned to their table, I heard him joke with one of his companions, something about giving someone a head start. That should have been my warning. We were woken in the middle of the night by the sound of suppressed gunfire. Bullets tore through the window. Dove reacted instantly, dragging me toward the door. We ran barefoot into the dark, bullets chasing us. We found a safari buggy with the keys inside and drove blindly into the savannah night. When she handed me water, I drank deeply. Everything went black. I woke tied up in a cave. Torchlight flickered against stone walls lined with hunting equipment. Across from me sat Cliff and Krista, or what remained of them. Their skin had been flayed from the areas where their tattoos had been. They were still alive. Hayes stepped into the light, and Dove stepped beside him. Her tattoos were gone, wiped away. Temporary ink. Her accent shifted effortlessly into the same polished British tone as his. They had hunted me from the beginning. Hayes explained it casually. Human skin was more valuable than animal hide. Tattooed skin was art. Rare. Collectible. Tourists came willingly. Tattooed travelers were the easiest prey. Dove had lured me here. My anger burned, but panic wouldn't save me. So I asked for a head start. Hayes smiled. He understood the game. They cut me loose at sunrise. I ran. Real bullets followed this time, but something else did too. A pride of lionesses emerged from the grass like living thunder. They descended on the poachers with terrifying precision, and behind them stood a massive male lion. His mane looked almost exactly like the one inked across my chest. Magnificent. The poachers had forgotten something crucial. They weren't the only hunters in the Serengeti. I made it back to the buggy and somehow returned to the lodge. From there, I made it home. I know some of them may have survived. Hayes, Dove, anyone not torn apart that morning. They could come after me, but I won't remove my tattoos. There are others now. Survivors like me. People hunted for their art. We share information. We watch for signs. We don't travel blindly anymore. That lion in the dawn reminded me of something. You can be prey, or you can be something that refuses to be hunted. I'm not hiding. I wear my tattoos proudly. And if the Elite Harvesting League ever comes for me again, they'll find a lion waiting. Story 2. I want to be upfront about something before I get into this. I'm a skeptic. Genuinely. I don't say that as a disclaimer to make what follows sound more credible. I say it because it's the honest framing for a story I'm not sure I believe, even though it belongs to me. What I can tell you is that my brain has filed it in the same drawer as real things. Not nightmares, not the foggy residue of a dream, a memory. And I've spent a long time sitting with the discomfort of not being able to explain why. Before I get to the story itself, I want to explain something about fear, because it's relevant to why this particular memory has stayed with me the way it has. There are different levels to being scared. When a horror movie makes you jump, or a story gets under your skin, there's a quality to that fear that keeps you anchored. Some part of you always knows it's a story or a scream. The adrenaline is real, but it's contained. It never crosses a certain line. Then there's something else underneath that. Something older and more physical. I call it primal fear, for lack of a better term. It's what happens when your body perceives a genuine threat and bypasses your thinking mind entirely. You don't decide to react. You just do. Fight or flight in the most literal sense, your legs moving before you've consciously chosen to move them. I experienced it for the first time at 8 years old during a computer class. It was 2006, and the internet was still largely unregulated in schools. I clicked on something during IT hours that turned out to be a screamer, the kind dressed up as an optical illusion. A cluttered room that looked like the kind of basement you prayed your friend would never ask you to go into, with a prompt telling you to stare at a corner. I did. A distorted face lurched toward the screen frame by frame. I didn't scream. I didn't even make a sound. What I did was tense so completely that my legs moved without my permission, and I was out of my seat and away from the screen before I had consciously registered what I was doing. My teacher came over because whatever I did must have looked alarming from across the room. It took me several minutes to come down from it. That was my first experience with that kind of fear. The story I'm about to tell you is about the other time it happened. The first time. And that one came several years before the screamer. This was 2002, give or take a year. I was young enough that time blurs at that age, and I cannot pin it down precisely. It was a Sunday afternoon, midday, summer. I want to be clear that it was not night. There was full daylight coming through the windows of our house in Toronto, cutting through the curtains and landing in patches on the floors. The sun was overhead, and the neighborhood outside was quiet in the way residential streets sometimes go quiet on summer weekend afternoons. I was alone in the house. I cannot tell you exactly why. My parents were out, my siblings weren't home, and for reasons I no longer remember, it was just me that day. The house itself was over 100 years old at the time, which should tell you something about its character. Dark oak fixtures throughout, Gothic touches in the architecture, a stained glass window built into a landing on the main staircase. It was the kind of house that had personality in ways that did not always feel comfortable, especially at night. The layout of the stairs matters here. The main staircase went up from the ground floor to a landing, and from that landing, you had to turn a full 180 degrees to continue up the final short flight to the top floor. So you would climb the first flight, hit the landing, pivot completely, and then take the last several steps to the upper hallway. At the top of that final flight, the hallway ran to the left, and to the right was the railing overlooking the lower staircase, with my bedroom door directly ahead. I was heading upstairs that afternoon. Whatever the reason was, I was going to my room. I took the steps the way you take stairs in your own home in the middle of a quiet afternoon, without thinking much about it. Each step creaked, something I was very familiar with from years of trying to navigate them quietly at night without waking anyone. In the daylight, I wasn't paying attention to any of it. I reached the landing and grabbed the banister and swung myself around the 180 turn to face the final flight of steps. That's when I saw her. She was not a surprise in the sense that she was entirely unknown. My older sister had mentioned her before. Vague things, knocks with no source, voices, the kinds of things that accumulate in old houses and get passed around between siblings with varying degrees of seriousness. I had also felt something over the years that I could not have articulated at that age, a quality to certain rooms at certain times, a sense of something present in a space that should have felt empty. My sister had described her once as a woman in a white gown, and had said that was all she had needed to see before she found a reason to look somewhere else. She was there, on the stairs, hovering, not standing. Her feet were below the level of the steps, toes pointed downward, and I remember this clearly because of where I was standing on the landing, relative to the stairs. My eye level was at her feet. I remember looking at those toes pointed straight ahead, and then my gaze tracking upward. She was moving at the pace of someone walking briskly, but there was no movement in her arms or her legs, no motion at all that suggested effort or locomotion. She simply moved forward the way something moves through water, or the way an image moves across a screen. Her gown was pale, her hair was long and dark. She did not acknowledge me. My presence did not register to her in any visible way. Her eyes were not on me. She was simply in motion, covering the length of the upper hallway with that silent, effortless glide. She passed the top of the staircase and continued moving toward the right side of the hallway. And then she went through the wall that was, on the other side, my bedroom. I stood on the landing and my brain caught up with what I had just watched, and the word that repeated in my mind was wall. There was a wall there. She had walked through it. My room was on the other side of that wall. I did not say anything. I did not scream or gasp or call out. I made no sound that I can remember. What happened instead was that my body made a decision without me. Vomit rose in my throat. My eyes watered, and I was moving down the stairs before I had chosen to move, not running in any deliberate way, but in the frantic, instinctive scramble of something trying to create distance from a threat as fast as physics will allow. I went down the stairs and through the house and out the front door. The last thing I remember with any clarity is standing in the middle of the empty street in front of my house, the summer sun directly overhead, looking back at the building. I do not remember the details of getting from the landing to the street. I have been told, or I imagine, that it was not a graceful exit. That is the whole of it. I have thought about it many times since then, and particularly after that screamer in 2006 brought it back with an unexpected sharpness. The feeling of both experiences was identical in quality, even if the cause was completely different. That total physical response, the body bypassing the thinking mind and simply reacting, is not something you manufacture. It is not something a dream or a half-sleep produces, at least not in my experience. It felt, and still feels, like a real thing that happened in the real world. I do not know what I saw. I cannot sit here and tell you that ghosts are real, that houses can be haunted, that something non-physical can share a space with you without your permission. My rational mind pushes back against all of that. It offers alternatives, childhood imagination, a trick of light, a half-formed memory that has been shaped and reshaped over the years into something more coherent than what actually occurred. But my memory does not store it with my dreams. It stores it with the things that actually happened. Alongside learning to drive, alongside graduating, it sits in the same category as events I was present for, and remember because they were real. I cannot reconcile those two things. I have stopped trying. What I can say is this. That afternoon in my childhood home in Toronto, in the middle of a quiet Sunday with the summer sun coming through the windows and the neighborhood completely still outside, something moved through the upper hallway of my house without making a sound, without touching the floor, and without noticing me at all. And then it went into my room. And whether I believe that or not, my body decided in about 3 seconds that staying in that house was not something it was willing to do. I was not alone that afternoon. My memory is certain of that, even when I am not. Story 3. I moved into this apartment 3 months ago. It was one of those places that feels like a lucky find, the kind you almost do not believe is real when you see the price. Old building, studio layout, high ceilings that made the space feel bigger than it was, floors that creaked in the specific way of wood that has been walked on for decades and has its own memory of everyone who came before you. I told myself the creaking was charming. That is what you tell yourself when you cannot afford to be picky. The only thing that genuinely bothered me was a single floorboard right beside my nightstand. Every time I shifted my weight in bed, it would groan, low and long. And in the quiet of late night, that sound carried further than it should have. I got used to it the way you get used to things in old apartments. You stop hearing them after a while. They just become part of the texture of the place. Last night I dropped a coin while reaching for something on the nightstand, and it rolled under the bed frame and landed near the baseboard. I got down to look for it, and that is when I noticed the floorboard. Not just that it creaked, but that it was loose, not nailed down. There was a slight gap along one edge, barely visible unless you were already on your hands and knees looking at the floor from that angle. I got my fingers under the edge and pried it up. No dust, no old pipes, no gap in the subfloor. A small black journal, leather cover, held shut by a frayed elastic band that had lost most of its tension. I sat on the edge of my bed and held it for a while before I opened it. I told myself it was probably nothing, maybe the private thoughts of whoever lived here before me, something I had no business reading. But I opened it anyway, because curiosity does not respond well to reason. The first page was dated exactly 2 years ago. "He's still here," it began. "I can hear him breathing the second I kill the lights." My stomach turned slowly. I read through the entries one by one. The woman who had written them described things that started small and built into something that consumed her entirely. She wrote about the feeling of being watched in the shower, a certainty that something was in the room with her that she could never confirm. She wrote about furniture moved by small degrees, a chair turned slightly, a table shifted an inch from where she had left it. She called the police more than once, and each time they found nothing. No sign of entry, no broken locks, nothing disturbed in any way that could be measured or documented. The entry about the toothbrush was the one that stopped me. She had noticed it was damp in the mornings. She had not used it since the night before. As the journal went on, the handwriting changed. The earlier entries were neat and controlled. Later they became uneven, urgent. The letters pressed too hard into the page. "He does not come from outside," she wrote, in an entry dated 4 months ago. He is already here. He knows my schedule. He waits for my eyes to close before he crawls out of his hole. I turned to the last page. The handwriting there was different from everything that came before it. Large, shaking, capital letters pressed so hard into the paper that you could feel the indentations on the back of the page. He is bored of me, it said. He says the next one should have longer hair. He says he prefers blondes. I have blonde hair. It reaches the small of my back. I dropped the journal. My hands were shaking badly enough that I had to grip the edge of the mattress to keep myself steady. I sat there for a moment, trying to breathe, telling myself this was the writing of someone who had been unwell, that this was paranoia documented in ink, that there was no reason to take any of it at face value. Then I looked down at the floor beside my bed and saw something I had lived with for 3 months without registering as anything unusual. There is a maintenance hatch built into the floor, partially tucked under the wooden frame of the bed. It is small, designed to access the crawl space beneath the apartment. It was sealed when I moved in, or at least it appeared to be. Layers of old white paint over the seams, the kind of paint that builds up over years and fuses things together. The paint around the screws was chipped. Not old damage. The chips were fresh. The edges still clean and bright, not yet dulled by dust or time. Small flakes of white paint were scattered on the rug directly beneath where my head rested every night. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. I had left it plugged in all night. The screen was black and stayed black. I held the power button, and nothing happened. I pulled the charging cable out and looked at the port. Something was jammed inside it. I worked it out with my fingernail, a small wad of paper tightly rolled, slightly damp. I unrolled it carefully, a face drawn in dark ink, crude lines but deliberate, a wide mouth full of teeth arranged into something that was meant to be a smile, and underneath it, one word, hush. I sat completely still and understood several things at once. The floorboard beside my nightstand, the one that groaned every night when I shifted my weight. I had assumed for 3 months that the sound was caused by me, that my movement in bed was putting pressure on the wood and making it speak. But I was not always moving when I heard it. Sometimes I heard it while I was lying completely still. Someone was stepping on it from below. I am sitting on my bed right now with my laptop balanced on my knees. The battery is at 10%. I cannot go to the door without crossing directly over the hatch, and I am not going to do that. I am looking at the gap between the edge of the hatch and the floor. There is an eye looking back at me through it. Bloodshot, wide open, completely still. It has not blinked in 3 minutes, and the wood of the hatch just creaked upward. Story 4. I want to start by saying that this is not a story I enjoy telling. I have told parts of it to very few people over the years, and even then, never the full version, never with all the details in the right order. Writing it out now is its own kind of difficult, but I think I need to. I have been carrying it for a long time, and it has changed me in ways I am still figuring out. I was a junior in high school when this happened. Shy does not really cover it. I had anxiety that made most social situations feel like something I needed to recover from afterward. And on top of that, my parents moved constantly for work. Every year or so, we would pack everything up and start over somewhere new. By the time I landed in yet another new school for my junior year, I had mostly stopped trying to build connections with people. Not because I did not want them, but because I had learned that wanting them and then losing them was its own particular kind of pain. If you are just going to move again in 12 months, what is the point of getting close to anyone? But I was lonely. That was the reality underneath all the logic I used to justify keeping my distance. I craved conversation and connection the way you crave something your body actually needs, and I had no healthy outlet for it. That is how I found Omegle. At first, I only used the text option. There was no version of reality where I was going to put my face on a webcam for a stranger to see. I just typed. I talked to random people about video games, politics, music, whatever came up. And something unexpected happened. I started to come out of my shell slowly, in the way that only feels possible when the stakes feel low enough. When someone got bored and disconnected mid-conversation, it stung at first, but I kept going back, and eventually, I learned to absorb it. Rejection from a faceless stranger on the internet is still rejection, and learning to tolerate it, to not let it collapse something inside me, was genuinely useful. I had some surprisingly real conversations on that site. The kind where you find yourself being more honest than you would be with people you actually knew, precisely because there was no consequence. You would talk through something that had been sitting heavy on you, and then the conversation would end, and that person would simply be gone, and somehow that was okay. I got to a point where I was comfortable enough, still text only, still anonymous, but comfortable. Then one night, I ended up in a conversation that just kept going. It was one of those exchanges that does not stick to a single topic, but rolls through everything, serious and funny in turns, intelligent without being pretentious. We talked for over an hour, and I was genuinely enjoying myself, which was not something I said easily. I had assumed from some of the things they mentioned that I was talking to a guy. The hobbies, some of the references, just the general feel of it. So, when they mentioned offhand that they were a girl, I was caught off guard. I tried not to make a big deal of it. I had a rule I had developed about not getting excited until I had some actual confirmation, voice or video, because the internet is what it is. But underneath my attempt to stay casual, I was aware that something had shifted. The conversation had already been good. Knowing she was a girl made it feel like something more. We kept talking, and at some point, without quite planning it, I found myself actually flirting. Badly, probably, but naturally, which was something that had never happened to me before. And then we both mentioned the same favorite book, For Whom the Bell Tolls. Both of us independently the same answer. And I thought, okay, this is the moment, and I asked if she wanted to switch to webcam. We did this clumsy text countdown to both turning on our cameras at the same time, which was goofy and did not really work. But it made me laugh and got rid of whatever nerves I had left. Her name was Emily. She was genuinely one of the most beautiful people I had ever seen. I am not exaggerating that, and after an initial awkward moment where we were both clearly trying to seem calmer than we were, we just kept talking like the transition had been seamless. She was a senior, lived a few states away in New Hampshire, and none of that mattered to me at all. We talked for another 2 hours on camera. I was having the kind of night that makes you feel like maybe things are going to be okay, like maybe the version of yourself you want to be is actually accessible. I was terrified of the connection dropping. I knew I needed to ask for her number before the conversation ended naturally, but every time I worked up to it, something would derail me. At some point, I steered the conversation toward relationships, which gave me an opening to ask if she was seeing anyone. She said she was single, but that she had met someone she was interested in. I told her that whoever he was lucky. She laughed and told me she was talking about me. I do not think I had ever blushed that hard in my life. I steadied myself. I was going to ask for her number. I had a way to phrase it, something that felt genuine without being awkward. I was right there, and that is when I noticed something in the window behind her. Her room was lit, and it was dark outside, which meant the window mostly reflected the room back at itself. But there was something in that darkness, a shape. I stared at it, trying to convince myself it was a smudge on my monitor or something my brain was constructing out of nothing because I was so full of adrenaline. Emily noticed my expression change and asked if I was okay. I said I thought I saw something. She turned, looked, told me it was nothing, probably just a smudge. I looked again. Just black. I let it go. A little while later, I saw movement again. This time I was more certain. I told her directly that I thought there was something outside her window. She turned and pointed out a tree in the yard, said the branches moved in the wind all the time, that it was probably that. We laughed about it. The tension broke, but I could not stop watching that window. I was right there again, about to ask for her number, when I saw it clearly. The window was opening. Slowly, the frame shifting in a way that no branch could explain. I could see it moving. I did not try to be subtle about it. I just told her. I said her name and told her to look at the window. She turned around and saw what I could see through the low-resolution webcam, a figure in dark clothing coming through the window. She screamed and ran out of the frame. The figure followed her. I sat at my desk and listened to sounds I cannot describe in a way that would do justice to how they felt. Her screaming, his voice rough and sharp, the sounds of movement through the house, and then a high-pitched sound that I still hear sometimes, followed by silence that was worse than everything that had come before it. I called 911. I could barely explain what was happening. I had no last name, no address, nothing except that she was in New Hampshire and that I had seen a man climb through her window. The dispatcher tried to help, but I had nothing useful to give. I ended up hanging up out of sheer frustration because the call felt pointless. I sat there staring at the empty room on the webcam feed. Just her bedroom, no one in it, the angle unchanged. I heard sirens before I saw the lights. Then I heard officers in the house. Shouting, more shouting, and then gunshots. More than I could count accurately. 15, maybe 20. A lot. I stayed on camera until I managed to get the attention of an officer who came into view. I told them what I had seen. That led to a phone call from a detective in New Hampshire. When I asked if Emily was okay, he paused, and I could hear him composing himself before he answered. She had not survived. The man who broke in did not run after he killed her. He stayed. The police arrived and confronted him, and the gunshots were what ended it. I spent days afterwards searching for any news article that matched what I knew. I found one eventually. That is how I filled in the details I have carried since then. And that is how I know that as of when I last checked, years after it happened, the full story still had threads that had not been resolved the way families need them to be resolved. I was close to her for a few hours. That sounds like nothing. Objectively, I know that. But something real had formed in that conversation. Something that felt like the beginning of something, and then I sat and heard the moment it ended. I still take medication for anxiety. I still struggle to form close connections with people. Not because I cannot, and not quite for the same reasons as before. Back then it was fear of rejection, or the pointlessness of connection before the next move. Now it is something harder to name, a knowledge that sits in your chest and does not go away. I know exactly how quickly someone can be there and then not be there anymore. And I know what it sounds like. Story 5. The first thing I noticed about the shuffling was that it never followed me outside. I did not realize that detail mattered at first. I only started paying attention to it because the sound had become impossible to ignore. And once you cannot ignore something, you start testing it, even if you tell yourself you are not. Inside the apartment, I would hear it. Outside the apartment, I would not. If I walked down the hallway toward the front door, it would follow one step behind me. If I opened the door and stepped into the building corridor, it would stop. Not fade gradually, not trail off into something quieter. Just stop completely, like something had reached a boundary it could not cross. At the time, I told myself it was the building. Old buildings make noise. Pipes expand and contract. Floorboards settle. Neighbors move around in apartments above and below, and beside you, and the sound travels in ways that do not always make sense. None of that explained the timing. It was always a little late. If I took a step forward, I would hear a faint drag of something behind me, about half a second after. A soft shuffle, careful, like someone walking on the balls of their feet, the kind of walk that suggests deliberate quiet. The first time I really noticed the timing, I stopped walking mid-step. The shuffling stopped too. I turned around. Nothing. Just the narrow hallway, the flickering light above the kitchen entrance, and that smell that had been in the apartment since the day I moved in. I had only been there a week at that point. It was not a good apartment, but it was the only one I could afford, and when your options are limited, you learn to overlook things. The previous tenant had left furniture and a few broken appliances. The walls were that specific shade of yellow that accumulates in buildings that have not been updated in decades, the color of time settling into paint. The smell had been there from day one. I cleaned everything when I moved in. Floors, countertops, cabinets, even the insides of the closets. The smell did not change. It reminded me of old laundry, the kind left in a machine too long. The shuffling started 2 days after I moved in. I tried to ignore it for a while. That approach lasted until I caught the timing clearly enough that I could not explain it away anymore. So I started testing it properly. I walked slowly, and it stayed slow. I sped up, and it sped up. I stopped suddenly, and it cut off mid-step like something had frozen in place. I spun around and found nothing there. I checked every mirror in the apartment. Nothing behind me. I set my phone on the kitchen counter facing the hallway and recorded myself walking away from it. When I watched the footage back, I saw myself walking normally. No second shadow, no movement anywhere in the frame behind me. Just me. I asked the landlord if I could check the building's hallway camera footage from my floor. He pulled it up without much question. I watched recordings of the hallway outside my door and saw myself leaving in the morning and returning in the evening. No one else came or went from my apartment. Nothing in the hallway moved when I was inside. The shuffling still followed me. A few days after that, I started noticing clothes going missing. Small things at first. A sock that never appeared after laundry. A shirt I could not locate during unpacking. I assumed I had misplaced things in the move. Then the smell started getting stronger. concentrated near the hallway, and one evening I took off my shirt before getting in the shower and stopped because the collar was wet. Not damp from sweat, wet in the way fabric gets when something has dripped on it repeatedly. And the smell on it was wrong. Not body odor, something that reminded me of saliva. I washed everything I owned that night, every piece of clothing, every pillowcase, every item of fabric in the apartment. The smell came back the next day. The shuffling continued to get louder over the following days. Not dramatically louder, just enough that I could no longer pretend I was imagining it. And I started to notice something else when I walked through the apartment. A warmth at the back of my neck. Not a touch, not pressure. Just heat, the kind that radiates from something standing very close behind you. Then, a few nights ago, the shuffling stopped. I was walking from the bedroom to the kitchen and realized partway through that I was not hearing anything behind me. I walked the hallway again deliberately. Nothing. I went faster. Still nothing. The apartment was quiet in a way it had not been since I moved in. I thought it was over. I thought whatever had been there had simply gone. But things have not gone back to normal. I keep doing things without deciding to do them. Yesterday, I opened the front door and stepped into the hallway before realizing I had not planned to leave. I was just standing there in the corridor with no memory of having made the choice to get up. This morning, I was in the kitchen and came back to awareness facing the wall. I do not know how long I had been standing there or what I had been doing. The smell is stronger than it has ever been. I have showered multiple times, and it does not go away. A few minutes ago, I got up from this chair and walked to the door again. I do not remember deciding to stand up. I keep looking at the handle. I keep thinking about the hallway, about the stairs, about the street outside. I have been sitting here for a while trying to finish writing this, and I am not sure why it is so difficult to do. My hands keep going still over the keyboard. I want to go outside. I keep looking at the door. Something has changed. The shuffling followed me for weeks, and then it stopped. And now I am the one walking to the door. I am the one that cannot stop. I do not think it left. I think it stopped following me because it no longer needs to. Story 6. Everyone is always looking for that perfect place. Big enough to feel like a home, cheap enough to actually afford, close enough to work that the commute does not swallow your mornings whole. Most people spend months searching and still settle for something that is almost right. Somehow, impossibly, I actually found it. The building was old in a way that felt charming rather than neglected. Narrow hallways, a slow elevator that made a faint mechanical sound on the way up, but everything was clean and well maintained. Quiet in the way that is genuinely hard to find in a city this size. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you have discovered something other people missed. The landlady lived in the same building, 3 floors above the apartment she was showing me. She was tall and older, with a soft voice and tight shoulders that never quite relaxed, and she seemed genuinely pleased to be walking me through the space. Not the performance of a landlord trying to close a lease. Something more like satisfaction. 2 bedrooms, a large living room, a balcony, and only a few blocks from my office, which meant I could walk to work every morning, instead of fighting my way through packed trains. I walked through each room fully expecting to find the catch. I had just graduated and still had student loans sitting on my back, so there was no version of this that should have worked financially. When she told me the rent, I just stood there. She explained that she gave a significant discount to young women who were new to the city because she had been one herself once. I did not question it. I signed the lease that same day. My dad helped me move in, carried boxes, fixed a few small things that needed attention. That first night, I dropped a toolbox and cut the side of my big toe badly enough that I cleaned it and bandaged it, and told myself I would look at it properly in the morning. When I woke up, the cut was gone. Not healing, gone. Like it had happened weeks ago. The first month was everything I had hoped this chapter of my life would be. I sat on the balcony every morning with scrambled eggs and coffee before walking to work. I was in my early 20s in the biggest city I had ever lived in, with a job I actually liked, and for the first time things felt like they were genuinely working out. The apartment was a large part of that feeling. The first sign that something was wrong came after a night out with coworkers. I got home and opened Instagram and saw a photo someone had posted from earlier that evening. I stared at it for a long time. I looked different, not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would necessarily notice right away, but I had been looking at my own face for 22 years, and something was off. My skin looked dull. My eyes looked tired in a way that was not just the lighting or the late hour. I pulled up older photos and held them against the new ones. Same angle, same smile, different person. Over the following week, it got harder to dismiss. My skin dried out. I started waking up exhausted, regardless of how much I slept. My back started aching. I yawned through meetings at work in a way that was embarrassing and completely out of character for me. I went to a doctor. He told me it was probably fatigue, stress from adjusting to a new city and a new job. That made enough sense on paper that I accepted it and kept going. But I did not get better. I got worse, slowly and steadily, in a way that fatigue alone does not explain. I stopped going out, stopped going to the gym. Most evenings I just sat in the apartment watching television, because I did not have the energy for anything else. I slid my rent under the landlady's door each month the way we had agreed and barely saw her after the first week. About 2 months in, I found a gray hair, Sunday morning brushing my hair, listening to a podcast. One gray hair. I stood in the bathroom for a long time after that. Then the gray hairs multiplied. My face thinned out. My skin looked dry and lifeless in a way that no amount of water or moisturizer improved. I lost more than 20 pounds without trying to. My coworkers started asking if I was okay, framing it carefully the way people do when they are worried, but do not want to be rude. My boss called me into his office and asked if I needed time off. Every doctor I saw said the same things: stress, burnout, rest. But I was not even working particularly hard. There was nothing obvious to burn out from. Thanksgiving came, and I went home to my parents, desperate for a break from the city and from whatever was happening to me. The first night back in my old room, I felt genuinely better. Energy returning, my skin looking more like itself. I slept deeply for the first time in months. But my parents looked at me like they were seeing someone they did not fully recognize. The worst moment came when I stood next to my mom in the bathroom mirror. We looked the same age. I was 22 years old and I looked the same age as my mother. I stayed home for 2 weeks. When I finally went back to the apartment, I already knew something was deeply wrong with that place. I walked in, grabbed 2 suitcases, threw in everything I could fit, and headed for the elevator. There was a woman already inside. Tall, athletic, wearing workout clothes and sunglasses indoors. She looked like she was in her early 20s. Effortlessly healthy, full of the kind of energy I had felt when I first moved in. I was not paying much attention to her at first. Then, something made me look again. The way she carried herself, the tight set of her shoulders, something familiar in the shape of her face. It hit me slowly, and then, all at once, she looked exactly like the landlady. Decades younger, but the same person. I stared too long and she noticed. She turned away and moved to step out the moment the elevator reached the ground floor. I grabbed her arm. I did not need her to confirm anything. I already knew. I started yelling at her in the lobby, demanding to know what she had done to me. She tried to pull away, but I held on. We fought right there in the entrance of the building until she shoved me hard enough that I fell backward and hit my head on the floor. I do not remember losing consciousness. The world just cut out. I woke up in a hospital room. She was sitting beside my bed, looking guilty and tired, in the way of someone carrying something they have been carrying for a long time. She apologized for pushing me. I told her I did not care about that. I wanted answers. She told me, through tears, that the same thing had happened to her. That she had moved into that apartment roughly a year before I did. That there had been a landlady before her, just as she had been a landlady to me. I asked her how any of that was possible. She said she did not know exactly. Only that the last landlady had told her the two apartments had been connected since the building was built. That one drains time, while the other restores it. She used the word straw, like a straw, one end taking and one end giving. My first instinct was to call it a lie, but she stood up, put a key in my hand, and told me both apartments were mine now. That she was leaving. I asked her what I was supposed to do with that information. She gave me a small, exhausted smile and told me to rent it out. I thought about going to the police. I thought about trying to find her after she left. I thought about going back to my parents and never returning to this city. But none of that gives me back what I lost. I am 22 years old, and my body is decades older than that. I look at myself in the mirror, and I know it is not going to reverse on its own. So I listed the apartment on the same website where I originally found it, and I moved into hers. The responses started coming in almost immediately. The first showing is today. That is why I am writing this. Out of guilt, mostly. One part of me keeps insisting that I do not have to do this, that there must be another way. But the other part is louder. The part that looks in the mirror every morning and feels the weight of years that were taken from me without my knowledge or consent. The girl coming to view the apartment today sounded young and excited on the phone. She is new to the city. She has her first real job. She told me she has been searching for weeks and that the photos look perfect. I remember sounding exactly like that. I remember exactly how that hope felt. The showing is in an hour. I have not yet decided what I am going to do when she gets here. But I am writing this because if there is any part of me that is still the person I was before I signed that lease, she deserves to know what this place is before she walks through the door. I was that girl once. Someone should have warned me. Story 7. I drove up Sunday in the thrumming rain to take care of my grandmother. The thunderstorm kept a cold rhythm against my truck the entire way up the mountain. For the last 60 years or so, Graham had lived in a farmhouse that my grandfather built with his own hands. Back when that meant something different than it means now. I spent most of the drive wondering how the visit was going to go, and history had taught me that there was no way to predict it. What was I going to do if she did not recognize me? What would I say if she came at me the way she had come at others before? Last time I had seen her, she had come at me with a knife. Graham had Lewy body dementia. It was not the kind of gentle fading that people talk about sometimes. It was a violent unraveling. She was not just becoming forgetful. She was going mad in ways that seemed to remake her into something else entirely. Over the years, Graham had become well known in the family for disturbing behavior, particularly around the children. She would stare from around corners with an intensity that seemed to have nothing to do with curiosity. She would crawl on all fours and hiss at the grandchildren like some furious animal. She terrified them. One morning, my cousin Sam had found Graham in the playroom with Sam's daughter, topless, rolling on her back and grasping at the child with peeled and bleeding fingernails, while making sounds like a wounded animal. Jane had gone non-verbal after that. Sam stopped coming to family gatherings and made it clear she was not willing to risk her daughter being in the same house as Graham anymore. Lately, Graham had taken to bouts of frantic begging in the middle of the night. She would chant things, or try to, except the words would not come properly. It sounded like she was choking on her own vocal cords. Sometimes they would find her out of bed in the middle of the night with the security alarm blaring, and she would be in the barn having what she called long talks with my grandfather, who had been dead and buried for decades. Grandfather had died young, in the style of men of his generation and circumstance. He had been drunk in town and running his mouth, and someone had decided to do something about it. Frontier justice, some would have called it. Grandmother had buried his body in the barn where they kept the goats. The family story went that Graham had started digging his grave right there in the barn the first night she found him, passed out in the hayloft, and she had never stopped. When grandfather was gone, grandmother did not fall apart. She kept the homestead running, and she did it better than grandfather ever had. She started a roadside produce stand, the first one the county had ever seen. Goat cheese and pickled vegetables in winter, peaches and peppers in summer. The business thrived. She educated 3 children on what she made. She was a self-made woman in every sense of the phrase, and she wore that independence like a badge. When the diagnosis came, Graham did not cry or fall into despair. She was too hard for that. She used to brag that no disease had ever tangled with a woman like her. My mother called and asked me to come stay with Graham for a few days, while my Uncle Bill took a break and went down to Gatlinburg with his girlfriend. I tried to beg off. Work had become a nightmare, my entire department being replaced by artificial intelligence, and I was already stretched thin. But my mother had a way of asking questions that made it impossible to refuse, and she reminded me that this might be one of the last times I would see Graham. The drive was treacherous in the rain. I nearly hit a utility repair truck around a flooded corner, and my truck got stuck in the mud on the access road to Graham's house. I was sitting in the cab trying to figure out what to do when I saw her coming through the rain in her nightgown, moving toward me with surprising purpose. She was talking about trucks and mud and something about engaging four-wheel drive, and she made almost perfect sense for a moment, which was alarming in itself because Graham had not made sense like that in a long time. I told her to go back inside before she caught her death, and she did, but not before saying something strange about canvases and trucks that I did not fully understand. I abandoned my truck and followed her up to the house, where an extremely ancient and extremely fat cat named Charlie promptly clawed my arm open when I tried to pet him. The scratches were deep. Graham saw them and took my arm to the sink and ran water over the wounds. She bandaged them, though she wrapped the bandage so tight it cut off my circulation. I fell asleep on the plastic-covered couch, and I woke up on my hands and knees in complete darkness, with water soaking through my clothes. Graham's bathtub was running at full blast, and Graham was floating face down in it. There was an iPad between her legs, playing a warning message in a mechanical voice over and over again, thinking, longer, better, answer. I dragged her out of the tub and did CPR on her in the dark hallway, pressing down on her chest and breathing into her mouth until the power came back on and she gasped awake like something rising from a grave. She was shaking and barely verbal. I held her while she sobbed. I noticed when I was brushing her hair that she had small black staples behind her ear, the kind you see after surgery. I did not ask her about them. I got her into bed and spent several hours cleaning up the water that had overflowed from the bathroom. I fell asleep around dawn, and I woke a few hours later to a sound I cannot adequately describe, a kind of pressure in my head that felt like something had been released. I saw something dark skitter across my bed, something larger than a cat, but moving like one, and when it reached the door I heard the familiar jingle of a bell. I could see the barn light on from my window. I threw on a robe and went out into the rain. There was blood on the barn floor, still wet. I heard Graham shriek from inside the house, and I ran back. But when I got to her room, she was sleeping peacefully like she had been the whole time. The next day I had a work meeting via Zoom. I noticed a Wi-Fi network called Clara, which must have been Graham's. During the meeting, the power went out and came back on slowly. When it did, I saw that the person I thought was Graham in the kitchen was just her coat on a chair. The back door was open, and Graham was standing outside in the rain, staring at me. When our eyes met, she ran. I chased her as far as I could, but she was fast in a way that did not match her age or condition. I gave up and went back inside. I got back on my Zoom meeting just as Graham jumped on my back from behind, clawing at my shoulders. I knocked her away, and she fell into the wall, putting her head through the drywall. She made a sound like an animal and ran to her room weeping. I waited outside her door apologizing until I heard her humming. That warm, familiar humming brought me out of my fear and into the kitchen, where Graham was making her famous chicken pot pie. She served me 2 enormous portions, and I ate them gratefully, lost in the comfort of the moment. When I bit into a piece of the second portion, I felt something hard, a brass bell, Charlie's bell. Graham looked down at her plate when I asked where Charlie was. She said he was a very naughty boy. I vomited until there was nothing left in me. The last thing I remember clearly is waking up on the barn floor with Graham's hands releasing the back of my head. I saw her reach her fingers into 2 wounds on either side of her head, and when she pulled them out, they were covered in blood and a clear liquid that looked almost like spinal fluid. She said he was almost awake. She said he was a hungry boy. She said he would need some of mine, too. I ran. I locked the barn door behind me, and I heard something heavy crash against it from the inside. I heard her voice calling me Mini-Me and telling me it was time to meet Grandpa. I have been running since then. I can see the house from where I am now. The power is off. I do not know what that means. I think I heard a man's voice a few minutes ago. Maybe Uncle Billy is back. I am trying to get this message out to anyone who can pass it to my mother or my uncle. Tell them Margie says there is something wrong with Graham. Tell them there is something very wrong with Grandpa. Tell them not to come back to the house. Tell them to burn it down. Story 8. I did not think much of the house when I first moved in. A friend had mentioned he was renting out a place that was cheap and quiet and perfect for someone like me who was just looking for a space that was theirs. He said something casual about a woman who had lived there before, but she was not there anymore. I did not ask for details. All I cared about was getting the keys and finally having somewhere that belonged to me. On moving day, my friend handed over the keys and told me to text him if anything came up. Then, he left me there. From outside, the house looked completely ordinary. If anything, it was just quiet in a way that felt almost deliberate, the absence of sound so complete it seemed intentional. No cars passing, no neighbors visible, just a street that had been drained of life. Inside, everything was clean, in the way that rooms become clean when someone has gone through them with purpose, removing anything that might suggest a person had lived there. No photographs, no personal items, no marks or scratches or signs of habitation, just furniture arranged in rooms, waiting for someone to give it meaning again. Upstairs, there was a door at the end of the hallway that caught my attention immediately. It was closed, and the frame around it looked warped, as though it had been forced at some point and never properly repaired. When I tried the handle, it did not move. I told myself it was just stuck and moved on. In the attic, I found the first real piece of evidence that someone else had been here. The room was dust and clutter, completely different from the rest of the house, filled with women's clothing scattered across the floor, like someone had left in a hurry and never looked back. Sweaters and jackets and shoes, all abandoned. In one of the jacket pockets, I found an ID. It had a photograph and a name, and it belonged to the previous tenant. I stared at it longer than I should have. Something about it created a small knot of unease in my chest. I took a photo and texted my friend asking if someone was coming to collect the remaining things. He replied almost immediately that someone would be there the next day. That was enough. I put everything back as I had found it and went downstairs to continue settling in. I built my computer, played some games, put music on in the background, the ordinary sounds of someone moving into a space and making it their own. Outside, the rain started. Light at first, then building into something heavier, the sound of it steady and constant against the windows. Everything felt normal, until the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, a woman was standing on the porch. She looked friendly, which was the only reason I did not close the door immediately. But there was something off about her that I could not quite name. Her eyes kept moving, kept checking the space around her, like she was constantly assessing whether it was safe to be where she was. She said she lived next door. She offered me a cake. She asked if she could come inside for a moment, just until the rain let up. I let her in because I did not have a reason not to. She sat on the couch, and we made conversation. Nothing memorable, nothing that should have created alarm. But the silences between what we said felt stretched, like something was missing from them, like she was waiting for something to happen, something that never did. After a short while, she stood up, gave me a polite smile, and said she should go. And then she did. Just like that, she was gone. I thought nothing of it and went back to my computer. But at some point, I started hearing something outside. Footsteps, slow and heavy, coming from the yard. I took off my headphones and listened. The sound was definitely there. I went to the window, but there was nothing visible in the darkness. I even stepped outside for a moment, but the rain soaked through my clothes immediately, and the yard was completely empty. I went back inside and told myself I had imagined it, but the house felt different after that. Too quiet, too aware of itself in a way that did not make sense. I went to bed eventually, and I do not know how long I had been asleep before the doorbell rang and dragged me back toward consciousness. I grabbed my phone and saw the time. 2:45 in the morning. When I opened the door, the neighbor was standing there again. She was soaked through, her hair plastered to her face, breathing like she had been running. She said there was someone outside. She had seen him walking around the houses. She did not want to be alone. I let her inside because I did not want to be alone either. I told her to wait in the living room while I checked upstairs, though I had no idea what I was looking for or what I would do if I found it. I texted my friend that there was someone outside watching the houses. He replied immediately that he would send someone over, someone he knew who worked with the police. I texted back that I had let the neighbor in so I was not alone. When I came back downstairs, the living room was empty. She was gone. I called out for her. No response. I grabbed my phone and saw a new message from my friend. He asked which neighbor I had let inside. I told him, the one next door. His response came seconds later. No one has lived next door for years. I own that house too. Everything inside me went cold. I ran upstairs without thinking about what I was doing. My eyes found the door at the end of the hallway immediately. The one that had been stuck. The one that had been locked. It was open now. Just a dark space, a gap leading into darkness. I knew, without any doubt, without needing any confirmation, that she was in there. I did not stop to think about whether that was the right choice. I ran to my room and threw open the closet and crawled inside and pulled the door shut behind me. My hands were shaking. My breathing was too loud in the small space, and then I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow, methodical, followed by a dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floor. She was inside the house. The rain continued outside, pouring steadily, filling the walls with the sound of water, while she moved through the rooms below me, searching, checking, getting closer. Her voice came from somewhere down the hallway, quiet and patient. You are here somewhere. I held my breath. My phone vibrated in my hand. A message from my friend appeared on the screen. You need to get out now. That woman is the previous tenant. She is mentally unstable. My heart was moving so fast I could feel it in my throat. The footsteps were on the stairs now. I could hear them clearly, moving upward, the dragging sound following behind. I could hear her breathing. I am sitting here now, in the dark, in the back of my closet, with nothing between me and whatever is looking for me except a thin wooden door that would not survive if she decided to pull it open. I can hear her in my room. I can hear her footsteps crossing the floor. I can hear her breathing just outside the closet. I can hear her hand on the door handle, and I know that if she pulls it open, if she finds me in here, that is where everything ends. The police are supposed to be coming. My friend said someone would be here soon. I have to believe they will get here before she opens this door. I have to believe I will not be found here in the dark. I have to believe I will not become another piece of this house's history, another reason to warn the next person away. The handle is turning slowly. Story 9. I was 31 years old when my husband died. He was 32. It happened at work in the middle of an ordinary day, his chest suddenly deciding to stop cooperating with the basic function of staying alive. By the time anyone reacted, by the time anyone understood what was happening, he was already gone. A week away from a cardiologist appointment that might have caught it, might have prevented it, might have changed everything. But a week is not the same as now. Now is what happened instead. We had been married for nearly 5 years. We had been best friends for 20. All the plans we had made together, all the conversations about what came next, all the quiet assumptions about how the future would look, they all dissolved in the time it takes a heart to stop beating. I became a widow while still young enough that the word felt wrong applied to me. Wrong in a way that made people uncomfortable when they had to say it out loud. Life continued anyway. That is the cruelest part, perhaps. The world does not pause for grief. Bills arrive on schedule. Work does not care about your emotional state. The basic requirements of existence do not negotiate. So I moved through the days the way you move through water, present, but not quite engaged. Going through the motions, because stopping was not an option that was available to me. I gave some of his things to his family, but most of it I kept. His clothes, his books, the small objects that had accumulated around his life, all of it stayed. There was a gift I had purchased for our 5th anniversary, something I had been planning for months. I kept that too. It was silly, but part of me believed that if I held on to enough of him, if I surrounded myself with enough of his presence, he might somehow stay. As though objects could substitute for the person, as though proximity to things could bridge the distance that death had created. Time moved forward while I stayed in the same place. My life became very small and very repetitive. Work, and coming home, and taking care of our pets, and sitting in front of the television pretending to watch it, and sleeping, and then doing it all again. Eventually, the people around me stopped extending sympathy. Grief has an expiration date in the eyes of most people, a point at which sadness stops being understandable and starts being an inconvenience, a thing that marks you as difficult, a person who is not handling their problems with appropriate grace. I had a son conure named Tuki. My husband had been the one to teach him to curse, had spent hours making him repeat words that were absolutely not appropriate for a bird to learn. It had been funny when Devin was alive, the two of them conspiring together to drive me crazy with sudden bursts of creative profanity. One night, months into the unending sameness of my days, Tuki yelled out my husband's name with a curse attached. "Fucking Devin!" The bird shrieked at me while I sat pretending to watch a movie. I asked him to repeat it. I begged him, actually, leaning toward the cage, desperate to hear it again. But Tuki had moved on to other things, back to being the irritating, adorable bird that he was. The moment had passed. I tried not to think about it too much, tried not to read anything into it, but it stayed with me in a way I could not quite shake. The next few days were quiet. I did not forget what I had heard, but it was not something that commanded my attention either. I had bigger things to dread, which was the approaching date of both my husband's death and what would have been our 6th anniversary. The two dates falling so close together was its own special kind of torture. Several friends offered to take me out. I declined all of them. My mother called and asked to come over, so I would not be alone. I lied to her and told her that friends were staying with me. I do not think she believed me, but she also did not push. I took both of those days off work. I allowed myself to fall completely into the grief without fighting it, let the tears come, and did not try to stop them. I held the urn that contained what was left of my husband against my chest, searching for some kind of warmth that was no longer there to find. I ordered his favorite hamburger from the restaurant we had gone to on our first date, and I made absolutely sure it came with no pickles, the way he had always insisted on it. I put on one of his favorite Godzilla movies, the kind of dumb, wonderful thing he had loved without irony. For a while I cried, and then, sometime during the movie, the crying stopped. My eyes grew heavy. The weight of exhaustion that had been sitting on me for months finally pulled me under, and I fell asleep on the sofa. I cannot tell you what I was dreaming about, but I remember the feeling of it, an emptiness that filled the entire space of myself, a hollowness that went all the way through. "Fucking Devin!" Tukey screamed. I jolted awake. Tukey's cage was not properly covered, though he usually did not make noise at night anyway, and the disruption was jarring. I looked at the kitchen clock. 12:01 in the morning. The anniversary had just crossed over into its official moment. "Happy anniversary, Devin," I said quietly to the urn, which was still sitting on the cushion next to where I had been sleeping. "Good night, Tukey," I whispered, as I got up and properly covered his cage. I went to turn off the television and to move the urn back to the shelf where it belonged, the place under the lightsabers that Devin and I had built together on our 3rd anniversary. That was when I saw it. A small, wrapped box was sitting on the shelf. Beside it was a note. I should not have picked up the note. Even in that moment, some part of me understood that there were ways of looking at this situation, reasonable ways that involved fear or anger, or the kind of rational response that comes from recognizing that something inexplicable is happening. But instead of those reactions, all I felt was happiness. The feeling was so unexpected, so warm, that it overrode every other consideration. The note read, "Happy anniversary, Kiara," in handwriting that I recognized completely. There was a small drawing of a bird on the side, simple and quickly sketched. This made no logical sense. I knew that. I was not a complete idiot. Someone had been in my house. Someone had left a gift and a note, and no one had stopped them. But the handwriting was so clearly his. The drawing was exactly his style. I went to check the outside cameras, hands moving through the motions even as my mind tried to process what I was looking at. But the footage showed nothing. No one had approached the house. No one had come through any doors or windows. There was simply no record of anyone arriving. I stood there in the darkness of my house and decided to stop trying to make sense of it. I went back to the unopened box. Tukey had been making noise in his cage, so I let him out and let him perch on my shoulder, allowing him to witness what was inside. I unwrapped the lime green wrapping paper carefully. Inside was a paintbrush, the exact paintbrush I had fallen in love with at an art market months ago, the one I had wanted but had not bought because it felt too expensive, too frivolous, too much of a luxury I could not justify. I had regretted it afterward, had thought about it several times, but life had moved on and I had never gone back to get it. No one knew I wanted that brush. No one except Devin knew what it even looked like. I should have questioned what was happening. I should have been afraid. But for the first time since before my husband died, I felt genuinely happy. It was a small thing, a moment of brightness in months of gray, and I was not going to examine it too closely or risk breaking it. I got out my art supplies. I had not painted in over a year, had not even looked at them since Devin died, but my hands remembered. They moved across the canvas with a kind of muscle memory, finding colors and motions that my conscious mind had not been using. The brush was not a great tool, to be honest. It left streaks on the canvas that should not have been there, and it did not hold the paint the way a good brush should. But I used it anyway, ignoring the flaws it created. Tukey slept on my shoulder for a while as I worked, then moved back to his cage. I stayed up all night painting, and for the first time in months, I was smiling. By morning, my hand could barely function. There was a weight that I had been carrying without full recognition of its presence, and setting it down, removing it from my shoulders, left me feeling strange and light. I hung the canvas over the bed, the place where I had told Devin years ago that I would hang a painting of my own, something I had never quite gotten around to in life. The sadness did not vanish, but something shifted. A small opening appeared, like a door had been cracked open to let in just a sliver of light. I started to respond to messages from friends. I began to paint again, slowly at first, then with more consistency. The ache in my heart did not ease exactly, but it became something I could move around, rather than something that was completely immobilizing. My family came on my birthday despite the fact that I told them not to come. I was angry about it initially, but by that evening I had to admit that their presence had been welcome. When they left that night, the silence returned, but it was not quite the same silence it had been before. I was cleaning the next day when Tukey began to panic inside his cage. "Fucking Devin! Fucking Devin! Fucking Devin!" he screamed, the words coming frantically, without the usual rhythm or spacing. I went immediately to open the cage. He kept screaming but rushed to my hand and finally calmed down as he hid himself under my hair, his tiny claws gripping carefully. I realized as I turned around that another gift had been placed by the urn. This time, I was more cautious about it. The first gift had been easy to accept, easy to rationalize as some kind of miracle. But a second gift meant that something ongoing was happening, something that required actual explanation rather than just wonder. Maybe my parents had left another gift on their way out, and I had simply not noticed. But when I saw the tag with my name on it, written in that unmistakable handwriting, I knew that was not the case. The note was written in Devin's hand. I knew his penmanship the way you know your own face. It would have been nearly impossible for someone else to copy it so precisely. And why would anyone take the time to do such a thing? I reached for the gift slowly, unsure if I should actually open it. But my husband had known me well enough to understand that curiosity would always win out. He was right. I unwrapped the lime green paper, the same color as the first gift, and found a blanket inside. It was bright yellow, the exact shade I had been wanting for months, something I had mentioned once in passing that I wanted but had never actually purchased. The blanket was soft and heavy in my hands. I noticed a small hole near the end of it, worn through the fabric, but I did not think too much about it. I took the blanket to bed with me and slept better than I had slept since before Devin died, wrapped up in the yellow fabric. feeling for the first time like my body was being held by something. After that night, things began to change. Tukey started to wake up at random hours screaming for Devon, or at Devon, I could not quite tell which. The pattern became predictable. He would panic, he would scream, I would calm him down, and then I would find a new gift waiting by the urn. At first, I was excited about the gifts. Each one was something I had wanted, something only Devon would have known about. But with each new present, there was something off about it. Always something small enough that I could almost convince myself it was nothing. A hair stick with a too sharp end, a plushie of a raccoon with both of its eyes missing, a necklace with a slightly broken clasp. I told myself these were just imperfections. No gift was perfect. The fact that they were there at all was the miracle. But deep down, I knew I was noticing these details for a reason, and the reason was that something was not right. I could ignore the small flaws for a while, but I could not ignore the night that the gift arrived, with a smell so putrid that I knew before I even opened it that something was fundamentally wrong. I held my breath as I unwrapped the lime green paper, the color that had shifted in my mind from exciting to ominous. Inside the box was a sun conjurer. It was rotting. The smell was so overwhelming that I had to step back, had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from vomiting. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, feathers falling apart, flesh giving way. I had mentioned once, in passing, that I wished Tukey had a companion, another bird to keep him company. This was not what I had meant. This was not a gift. This was something else, something cruel, something that made me understand that whatever was happening here had stopped being a comfort and had become something dangerous. I grabbed the box and threw it outside, without thinking, without trying to be gentle about it or respectful. I was shaking as I threw it, and I kept shaking for hours afterward. That night I could not sleep. I paced through the house, trying to figure out what to do, trying to understand what was actually happening. And I made a decision that felt like the only option available to me. I started to throw away the gifts, all of them. The paintbrush, the blanket, the hair stick, the raccoon plushie, every single thing that had arrived with that lime green paper and that handwriting. My heart broke as I did it, because these were things from Devon, or things that came with the semblance of being from Devon, and getting rid of them felt like a betrayal. But the gift with the rotting bird inside had changed something. It had made me understand that whatever this was, it was not bringing me closer to my husband. It was doing something else entirely. For a while after that, nothing came. Weeks passed. I adjusted to the absence of gifts and the absence of Tukey screaming at night. I told myself that I had done the right thing, that I had stopped something before it got worse. But some part of me missed it, missed the feeling of connection it had given me, missed the sense that Devon was still trying to reach me. Then Tukey screamed again. This time the box that appeared was larger than any of the others, substantially larger. My hands trembled as I reached for the note. "Miss you," it read. I ripped through the wrapping paper so frantically that I cut my hands in multiple places, the paper slicing thin lines across my palms and fingers. And I screamed. I do not know what sound actually came out of me, but it felt like it came from somewhere deep in my body, from a place that understood before my conscious mind caught up. Inside the box was my husband's head. It was severed cleanly at the neck, placed carefully as though it had been a gift that someone wanted to present with respect. But Devon's head was looking directly at me, and his face was holding an expression that was not natural to his actual face. A smile that was too wide. Eyes that were fixed and staring. His expression was unnatural in the specific way that things become unnatural when they are being imitated rather than being authentic. And then he blinked. The movement of his eyelids was slow and deliberate, and he continued to stare at me. The smile became somehow wider, stretching beyond the boundaries of what a face should be able to do. His jaw unhinged slightly, like he was trying to open his mouth further than mouths are supposed to open. I cannot tell you what I did after that. My mind has refused to hold on to those moments, has blanked them out completely, has decided that the less I remember about my response, the better. But I know that the head turned to ash. I know that the ash went everywhere. I know that I became a different kind of person in that moment, the kind of person who understands that some things are wrong in a way that cannot be fixed and can only be escaped. I threw away everything, not just the gifts, though I did throw away all of those, but everything else too. Every piece of clothing that had belonged to Devon. Every book he had marked with notes. Every small object that carried his fingerprints or his memory. I took it all and I got rid of it systematically, methodically, as though the act of removing his physical presence from my house could also remove the thing that had been using his image as a kind of costume. When I got to the closet, I found the gift I had been supposed to give him on our 5th anniversary. The gift I had been keeping all this time, unable to let go of it, unable to move forward with the life I was supposed to be living. I held it in my hands, and I understood that this was the piece that had been missing from the entire equation. I had been receiving gifts this whole time, but I had never given anything back. The momentum had only moved in one direction. So I took the unopened gift and I placed it next to the urn, and I wrote a note that read simply, "It's time to let go." I brought Tuki's cage into my bedroom that night. I wanted to leave the house, wanted to run somewhere, wanted to put distance between myself and this place, but I did not know if distance would help, did not know if something like that could be escaped by simply moving. So I stayed. I did not sleep. I sat in the dark with my bird, and I waited. By morning, the gift was gone. The urn was gone too. The apartment felt different, felt lighter, felt like it belonged to me again, rather than to something that had been visiting. Tuki never called for Devon again. No more gifts arrived. The scratches did not reappear on the walls. The cold spots in the apartment slowly warmed back up. Life, somehow, began to move forward again. I gave away most of the things that Devon had given me in his actual life. It hurt, but the hurt felt clean and honest in a way that grief should be. It was the hurt of letting go, not the horror of something pretending to be close while being something else entirely. The only gift of his that I kept was Tuki. I could not bring myself to give him away. He was the last real connection I had to the person my husband actually was, and I was not ready to lose that. He was not a ghost or an echo or a thing pretending. He was just a bird, and he had loved Devon, and that was real in a way that the rest of it had never been. The anniversary that would have been our 7th is coming up soon. I have not bought any gifts. I have not made any special plans. I will probably go to work that day like it is any other day, and I will come home and I will feed Tukey, and I will eat a normal dinner, and I will go to sleep in a bed that contains no remnants of someone else's presence. And I will hope, more than anything, that Tukey does not call out for Devon's name, because I know what will happen if he does. I know that I will check the area by the urn, and I know what I will find, and I know that I will have to go through the whole thing again, removing piece by piece, letting go layer by layer, trying to convince whatever is left of my husband that it is time to actually let me go. I do not know if he can hear me from wherever he is now, but I hope that he understands that keeping me in a loop of almost connection, of gifts that are wrong in ways I cannot quite articulate, of a presence that feels like imitation rather than truth, is not love. It is something else, something that wears the shape of what we had, but has become something twisted by death and time and whatever space exists between those two things. I hope he can let me go the way I have had to let him go, not because I do not love him, but because loving someone sometimes means accepting that they have to leave, that they have to actually leave, completely and finally, not lingering at the edges, not waiting, not sending gifts wrapped in lime green paper with notes written in handwriting that should have stopped existing months ago. I love him still, but I need him to be gone, and perhaps, if I am very fortunate, he will understand that need finally, and he will stop trying to reach me. He will stop using Tukey as an anchor. He will stop leaving gifts that are wrong in specific and horrifying ways. He will simply let me live the life I have to live without him. Story 10. I am writing this from my car in the company parking lot. I do not want to go inside. I have been sitting here for almost 20 minutes now, engine off, hands in my lap, staring at the glass doors like something bad is waiting for me on the other side. I do not know if I can keep doing this. I need someone to tell me what is happening, because I am running out of explanations, and the ones I have left are getting worse every day. I started a new job 4 weeks ago, mid-size company, marketing department. I went through a completely normal interview process, 3 rounds, nothing strange about any of it. I got the offer email on a Tuesday. I signed the paperwork on a Friday. My start date was the following Monday. I have the email chain saved. I have the signed offer letter in a folder at home. I have received 1 paycheck already. Everything is dated within the last month. Everything checks out. I am absolutely certain of this. On my first day, a woman from accounting hugged me at the coffee machine. She pulled me in like she had known me for years and said, "Welcome back. We missed you." I assumed she was just being warm and friendly to a new hire. Maybe it was the kind of office culture where people were overly welcoming. I laughed it off and said thank you. But then her face shifted. She looked genuinely confused and said, "What do you mean, new? You have been here since I started." I let it go. People misspeak. First day nerves on both sides. I told myself it was nothing. By the end of that first week, I had collected 6 similar moments. A guy from IT stopped me in the hallway and asked how my dog was doing. I do not have a dog and have never owned one in my life. A woman in HR asked if I was planning to bring my husband to the company picnic. I am not married. The director of my department casually referenced a project he said I had led back in 2019, 4 years before I had ever heard the name of this company. I started checking things more carefully after that. I logged into the company directory. There is a photo of me in my profile. It is clearly my face, my hair, my general look. but I have never taken that photo. I do not recognize the shirt I am wearing in it. The hire date listed underneath my name is January 2017. That is almost 9 years ago. I went to HR to get answers. The woman at the desk pulled up my file without hesitation. She showed me the new hire paperwork I actually signed last month. Then she scrolled further and showed me 9 years of performance reviews, salary adjustments, training certifications, and benefit elections. All of it was under my name. All of it had my signature on it. The signatures match mine exactly. I have never signed any of those documents. I have never seen them before in my life. I asked her if there might be 2 employees with the same name, some kind of overlap in the system. She checked thoroughly and came back with nothing. There is only 1 employee by my name, me. She looked at me with this expression somewhere between concern and amusement and said, "Honey, did you hit your head or something?" I did not know how to answer that, so I just left. I walked back to my desk. There were 3 framed photos sitting on it that had not been there at the end of the previous week. One was of me at what appeared to be a company event, the kind of group photo people take at office parties. It looked like it was from years ago based on the decor and the clothing people were wearing. One was a photo of me standing with 2 children I have never seen before in my life. The last one was me holding a small white dog on a beach I have never visited. The children in that photo. I keep coming back to that photo. The kids look like they could be mine if I had any. There is something in their faces that I cannot dismiss as coincidence. I sat at my desk holding that frame for a long time, and I could not stop looking at the older child because she has my eyes. Not similar eyes. My eyes exactly. I sat there longer than I should have, and something strange was happening in my chest while I looked at her face. That was last Tuesday. For the rest of the week, I tried to act normal. I did the work I was actually hired to do. I responded to emails about the projects I am assigned right now. But people kept referencing things I have no memory of doing. A coworker asked me if I wanted to get lunch, like we used to. The receptionist asked how my mother was recovering from her surgery. My mother is perfectly healthy. She has not had any surgery. I have not even talked to her in 3 weeks because we are in the middle of an argument. None of what people were telling me matched anything real. On Friday, the IT guy came by my desk with a cart and said, "Hey, your old laptop finally died. Want me to pull anything off it before I wipe it?" I asked what he meant. He pointed to a laptop on the cart with a label that had my name on it. The service tag was dated 2018. He said it had been my primary work machine until last year when I switched to the one I use now. I asked if I could look at what was on it before he wiped it. He shrugged and plugged it in right there. The desktop loaded. The wallpaper was a photo of me with the same 2 children from the framed photo on my desk. The folders on the desktop were organized exactly the way I organize my own files. The browser history was full of websites I read regularly, searches I would actually run. There were emails open in tabs, sent from a personal address that is not my personal address, but is structured in exactly the way I would structure an email handle. Everything on that machine felt like me, deeply, specifically me, like a version of me had used it every day for years. I asked him if I could take it home for the weekend before he wiped it. He said, "Sure, no problem." I spent the entire weekend going through it. There are 9 years of what appears to be my life on that laptop. Photos with the children at birthday parties, school events, holidays, Photos with a man whose face I do not recognize at all, but who appears in hundreds of pictures as though he is a permanent fixture. Tax documents with my name. Travel itineraries to places I have never been. Medical records from appointments I never had. Emails from a school about parent-teacher conferences for children whose names I do not know. A whole life. Detailed and specific, and mine in every way that matters, except that I have never actually lived any of it. The man in the photos is wearing a wedding ring, and so am I in every single photo. I do not own a wedding ring. I have never been married. I held up my left hand and looked at it for a long time. There is a faint, pale band on my ring finger, the kind of mark that forms when someone wears a ring for years and then takes it off. I have never worn a ring on that finger. I do not know how that mark got there. I do not know when it appeared. This morning I came in and the receptionist smiled at me the way she always does and said, "Is your daughter feeling better?" I stopped walking. I said, "What did you say?" Her smile faded a little and she said, "Your daughter, the little one. You mentioned yesterday that she had a fever. I do not remember having any conversation with her yesterday." I do not have a daughter. I walked to my desk and sat down and looked at that framed photo again. The one with the two children. The younger one looks like she might be around 6 years old. She has my eyes. I have been staring at that photo for almost an hour this morning, and something in my chest keeps pulling tight when I look at her, and I cannot explain it because I have never met this child, and I do not understand why it feels like I have. I checked my personal phone, every contact I recognize, no photos of children anywhere, no messages from anyone calling me mom. My personal email is the same account I have had for years, and there is nothing in it about a family, a husband, children, any of it. But on my work laptop, the one I have been using for 4 weeks, the calendar has an entry for this evening at 6 in the evening. It says, "Pick up Maddie from dance." I did not put that entry there. I have never put anything in that calendar about a child. Maddie is the name written in small, careful letters on the back of the framed photo. The older girl. The one with my eyes. I am sitting in this parking lot right now, writing all of this out, because I do not know what happens if I go back inside. I do not know what happens if I just drive away and never come back. The receptionist knows the name of a child who is supposed to be my daughter. The HR system has 9 years of my supposed working life documented in it. Every person in that building remembers a version of me who has been there since 2017. They are not lying. I know the difference between someone lying and someone telling the truth, and every single one of them believes completely what they are saying to me. The only person in this entire building who thinks I am new here is me. I keep going back to the framed photo. The older girl, Maddie. She has my eyes, and there is a small chip on her front tooth, right on the edge of it, the way a tooth looks after a hard fall. I have the exact same chip on my front tooth. I got it when I fell off a swing when I was 7 years old. I still remember the sound when I hit the ground. I still remember the taste of blood and the feeling of running my tongue across the broken edge. That little girl has my chipped tooth. I do not know who to call. My family will think I am having some kind of breakdown, and honestly, I cannot entirely rule that out, except that the photos exist, and the laptop exists, and the pale mark on my ring finger exists, and those things are real. I cannot tell my friends, because they only know the life I am actually living, and I would not know how to explain any of this. There is an entire other life sitting on a laptop in my passenger seat right now, and I do not know what it means or how it got there, or whose life it actually is. I am going to drive home. I am not going back inside today. I cannot. But I cannot stop thinking about one thing, and it is taking up all the space in my head, and I do not know how to make it stop. Someone is going to expect me to pick up that little girl from dance class tonight at 6. She is going to stand outside that studio with her dance bag, and she is going to wait, and whoever is supposed to come for her is not coming. Whether that person is me in some version of a life I cannot remember, or someone else entirely who has somehow disappeared from this situation, that child is going to wait outside in the evening and nobody is going to show up. I cannot stop thinking about that. I cannot stop thinking about her standing there looking at every car that pulls up and feeling that specific fear that children feel when the person who is supposed to come for them does not come. I need to understand what is happening here before 6 o'clock tonight. Someone put those photos on my desk. Someone took them, framed them, and placed them there between Thursday evening and Friday morning. That person knows exactly what is going on. That person has answers to every question I have been carrying around for 4 weeks. I need to find them. I need to find them soon. Because I do not know if I am being slipped into someone else's life, or if someone else has been quietly removed from mine. And I do not know which of those possibilities is worse. And either way, there is a little girl with my chipped tooth waiting for someone at a dance studio at 6 in the evening, and I am the only person who seems to understand that something is very, very wrong. Story 11. I am writing this from my mother's room. I have been sitting on her bed for a long time now. Maybe an hour, maybe more. The phone is in my lap, and my hands will not stop shaking, and I do not know how to explain what I just watched, or what I just read, or what is standing in the doorway smiling at me with my brother's face. Let me start from the beginning. My mother died a few days after giving birth to me. I never met her. Not really. I only ever knew her through videos my father kept on his phone, short clips that he never deleted, never showed me willingly. But that I found once, when I was small and watched alone in my room, with the volume turned low. My older brother Ivan always blamed me for her death. He said it openly, without shame, the way people say things they have rehearsed so many times they no longer feel the weight of them. And I never argued with him. Part of me believed he was right. Part of me still does, or did, until tonight. My father was different about it. He never blamed me out loud, but he was quiet in a way that filled every room he was in, a heaviness that he carried everywhere and never set down. He was a man who had lost something so large that the loss became him. I used to watch him sometimes when he did not know I was looking, and try to figure out if what I saw in his face was grief or resentment, or just the particular exhaustion of a person trying to keep going. I never figured it out. I told myself I was imagining things. Children do that. They learn to shrink themselves into the shape that causes the least amount of trouble. No one ever went into her room. My father walked past the door every single day and never opened it. Ivan acted like it did not exist, but I went in sometimes, quietly, when the house was still. I would sit on the edge of her bed and breathe the air and try to feel something I could not name. There was a scent that clung to the room for years, something soft and specific that I could never identify, and I was always afraid that one day I would go in and it would be gone. Eventually it was, and not long after that, I stopped going in too. That was 12 years ago. When I turned 17, my father died. A few weeks after that, my brother left. Before he walked out the door, he told me I was the poison that had killed both of his parents. I wanted to say that they were my parents too. That I was their son too. That I had lost them just as much as he had. But the words did not come, and he left. And the house went completely silent in a way it had never been before. Not even during the worst of the grief years, because at least then there had been people in it. Tonight, I got drunk. Not planned, just a slow kind of drunk that happens when you have been sitting alone for too many hours, and the bottle is right there, and the thoughts get too loud to sit with sober. And then I walked into her room. I do not know exactly why. Maybe because I had nowhere else to go. Maybe because some part of me was looking for her the same way I used to when I was small. I cursed myself for being born. I said it out loud to the empty room, which is not something I have ever done before, putting that thought into actual spoken words, and it sounded worse out loud than it does in my head. Then I lay down on her bed and stared at the ceiling and let the thoughts come. They came slowly, the way heavy things sink, and one of them was this. Would my death mean anything to Ivan, or would it be the first time my life had meant anything at all? I lay there with that thought for longer than I should have. After a while I got up. I am not sure what made me move. Maybe the room itself. It felt like it was waiting for something. I started going through her things. Her belongings were still arranged in her cupboard exactly as they had always been. Untouched. Preserved in the specific way that only happens when everyone agrees without speaking, to leave something alone forever. Her clothes hung the way they did in the videos. I found my parents' wedding album and sat with it for a while, turning pages, looking at photographs of two people who were happy before I existed. It made something ache in the center of my chest, the particular pain of seeing joy that you ended. I put the album down and found a small safe tucked behind her things. Inside was a collection of objects that someone had arranged carefully, almost protectively. A hospital bracelet with her name on it, the ink gone faint, a small diary filled with neat handwriting that stopped too soon, a hairbrush with a few strands of hair still caught in the bristles, a dried flower pressed flat between two pieces of paper, a photograph of my parents and Ivan the day he was born. My mother, pale and exhausted in a hospital bed, but smiling with her whole face, my father standing beside her with a kind of happiness I never saw on him in real life. Her wedding ring in its small box. And beneath all of it, other things. A pair of tiny, knitted socks, never worn. A sealed envelope with my father's name written on the front, never opened. A second hospital tag, smaller than the first, no name on it, just a date. And under everything, her phone. I sat there looking at all of it for a long time. Then I opened the envelope. The letter was in her handwriting, the same neat script from the diary. She wrote that she wished she could be there for her son's life, that she wanted to see him smile and take his first steps, and grow up, and fall in love, and have a family of his own. She said she wanted to hear him call her mom. Then she said something that stopped me completely. She wrote that she and my father had made a mistake, that they had wished for their son to be born alive and well, and that something had heard that wish, and that it was fractured, wrong in a way they could never undo. She said the fractured wish might make his life miserable, but that he deserved to know the truth. She asked my father to tell him, or to show him what she had left. She wrote that she was sorry for leaving too soon. She asked my father to tell Ivan to be kind, to be a good big brother to Felix. She signed it with her name, Elena. My name is Felix. My mother wrote my name in that letter. She knew me. She left something for me specifically. When I finished reading, I could not feel my hands properly. I stood there, staring at the page, trying to understand what she meant about the wish, about something fractured, about something hearing them. I could not make complete sense of it, but one thing landed in me with full weight. She had died so I could live. She had said so. I really had cost her everything. But she had also written, "Do not blame him." The words sat in the middle of the letter like they were waiting for me. I read them several times. I did not know if they were meant for my father, for Ivan, or for me. With my hands still shaking, I picked up her phone and turned it on. The screen lit up slowly. The phone was completely empty, except for one thing, a single video file. The title was my name. I pressed play. For a few seconds there was only darkness. Then the image came clear, and I saw her for the first time, as a real thing, not a photograph, not a fragment, a real living person sitting upright in a hospital bed. She was pale and drenched in sweat, her hair clinging to her face, her eyes sunken but intensely alert. She looked directly into the camera. She told me that what I was watching was my second birth, that I had been their first child, and that I had been born dead. She told me that they had tried for 10 years to have a child, and when I finally came, I came cold and still, and she had held my body in her arms, and they had lost everything they had built, their hope around. She said grief takes you to places you do not understand. She said their prayers changed, somewhere in the darkness of that loss, shifted from asking for peace into something else, a wish to have me back just once, to hold me warm again. She said they forgot that when you pray with enough grief, something else listens too, and sometimes it answers. A year later, she became pregnant again. They believed their wish had been granted. They named the baby Ivan, and he came into their lives like light, and they believed everything was finally right. Then 6 years after Ivan's birth, I was born. They called it a blessing. But a week before she made the video, she saw a birthmark on me. The same birthmark I had the first time. That was when they understood. She said my father had a theory he called cross-possession. He believed there were souls wandering in a world alongside ours, without physical form, searching for bodies, waiting for a moment of connection strong enough to let them cross over. And grief, she said, is strong enough to be heard across that kind of distance. The connection had taken years to form, but now it was here. She said she did not know if it was inside me or Ivan. She said my father had placed a talisman in the house. As long as neither of us stayed away from the house for too long, the integration would never complete. The thing inside one of us, whatever it was, would remain dormant, held in place. She said if Ivan ever began to feel like his thoughts were not his own, if he heard something calling from far away, he should not answer it, because it would not be guiding him back. It would be learning how to replace him. She said if it was me, if I ever felt like I had lived moments before they happened, If I saw things that did not belong to this world, I should tell someone. I should not keep it inside. The last thing she said was this: if either of us ever began to feel more at home outside the house than inside it, if the world beyond these walls started to feel more familiar than the place we grew up in, that meant it had already begun. The video ended. I sat in the silence for a long time. My eyes were burning, and when I touched my face, my fingers came away wet. I had not noticed when I started crying. The room felt different now, heavier, like something in the air had shifted and was pressing in from all sides. I thought about Ivan. I thought about where he had gone when he left. He had been gone for months, away from the house, away from whatever my father's talisman was supposed to hold in place. I thought about how long he had been out there beyond these walls, in a world that my mother said would start to feel more familiar than home if it had already begun. I thought about what she said about replacement. That is when I heard footsteps in the hallway. I looked at the door, and Ivan was standing there with his backpack on, like he had just arrived, like he had traveled a long way to be here tonight of all nights. He was looking at me and smiling. He said he was sorry. He said he should have understood me better. He said he would be kind to me, like a good big brother. He said we would be a happy family, just like Mom wanted. He was still smiling when he said it. I know my brother's face. I have spent my whole life reading it, watching it for signs of how bad today was going to be, learning every expression it made. Anger, contempt. That particular cold look he got right before he said something that would stay with me for weeks. I know what his smile looks like. This was not it. The shape was right. The placement of it was wrong. In a way I cannot fully put into words. The way a photograph of a person is not the same as the person, the way something can look correct in every detail and still feel profoundly false. His eyes were too still. He was not blinking the way a person blinks. He was holding the smile at exactly the same angle, and it had not shifted once since he appeared in the doorway. He said we will be a happy family just like Mom wanted. He has never in his life called her Mom in a sentence directed at me, not once. Mom was always his, a possession, something I had taken from him by being born. He is still standing in the doorway. He has not moved. He is still smiling. I have not moved either. I have my phone in my hand, and I am typing this, and I am trying to think about what my mother said. The talisman, the house, integration that cannot complete as long as we are here. But Ivan has been gone for months, and I do not know if bringing him back inside changes anything, or if it is already too late. I do not know if the thing in the doorway is my brother wearing something else underneath, or something else wearing my brother all the way through. I do not know which one my mother was warning me about, but I know what she said about it feeling like home outside these walls. She said that means it has already begun, and Ivan came back here tonight like he had been called, like something told him this was exactly where he needed to be. He is still smiling. I cannot look away.